Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Jackie Hyland in New York. A tough economy means companies need to cut back. And all too often, that comes in the form of layoffs. From finance to the airlines, even media has been hit with massive job cuts across the board. But what if you could turn being laid off into a career catalyst? We're joined today by Brittany Height from the Wall Street Journal for some tips on how you can get back on the professional path. Brittany, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So it is a tough time. We're seeing so many people being laid off right now, and some people are taking it personally, but Brittany, they shouldn't.
No, not at all. Career experts say, with the economy in the state that it's in, everyone has seen layoffs, everyone expects them. People shouldn't take them personally, because when you go to try and get that second job, recruiters are going to understand, and they're going to have dealt with these things before. Most people aren't going to hold it against you, and especially if you're early into your tenure, they're going to realize, the layoff has not been your fault, and, it's more a reflection on the company's performance than it is of yours personally.
So, Brittany, how can someone use a layoff, per se, as a way to grow or as a career catalyst?
It's actually a great way. Counselors say, if you do find yourself in this situation and you are laid off, take the time, reflect, really look into yourself and, is this really something that you want to do? Maybe there's another path. Maybe you took this job right out of college because everyone else was taking jobs, and, your parents were encouraging you, they wanted you to have a job right out of college. So, experts say try to take this to really focus and see if there's something else maybe that you'd always wanted to explore but never quite had the time to look into. And after a layoff can be really a great time to sort of delve into that sort of exploration and other options.
So I guess if you're financially set, you can be a little selective. If not, you may have to jump right into something.
Right. Yes, that's one problem. A lot of people who get laid off early in their careers will face. Coming right out of college, you've got student loans, you just signed a new lease, got all these expenses, and you get the pink slip. It can be a little scary, but I know with student loans, most providers will work with you. You can try and get a deferment or get your payments down. There's a lot of options. You can, if you just work with people and are honest about your situation, most people will be accommodating.
So you're also recommending, and I find this one interesting, that employees that are laid off, they should get something in writing, something that indicates that it wasn't the employee's fault.
Right, yes. One expert I talked to said, that can be a great way to sort of, have hard evidence that, when you go in for your next interview, not only do you have someone listed as a reference on your resume, but you can, just show the letter to them saying, here, I performed well, I met all my goals, I was doing a great job, but unfortunately, I just sort of came in at a bad time in the economy, so.
And I would imagine, Brittany, it's a good thing to be honest when you're applying for other jobs. Tell the employer you were laid off during the interview, right?
Oh, definitely. All of the career counselors I've spoken with have said honesty is always the best policy. There's no sense in trying to hide it or lie about it. Layoffs really aren't seen as quite the black mark they were, 20, 30 years ago. They happen so often and so broadly across all sectors that most recruiters are going to understand, and if you're just honest with them, they'll help you try to move on from that and understand what you're going through.
And really, nowadays, there are so many people in the same boat as you, right?
Right, exactly. So, recruiters aren't going to take, your sign of being laid off as a sign that you're not doing well. They see it so often that it's just like, having a job for 2 years, getting laid off, it all sort of fits in, and it's something they see very frequently.
So then it's not necessarily damaging to an employee's career being laid off. It's something that people, in most cases, can bounce back from, and they can even find a new career out of it.
Right, exactly. Many of the people I've spoken with have said, I never would have, thought this 20 years ago or 10 years ago, 5 years ago, however long. But being laid off was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Most people, it may take a few weeks, a few months, even a few years, but most people will say, by the time, they get to the other end of that spectrum, they can look back and see, how much they've grown from it, how much they've learned. They've learned to be independent and to, really move on from that challenge.
Right. Let's talk about socially. How do you handle telling your friends, and especially your family, that you've been laid off? Some may not understand the way others would.
Right. Well, it can be a tough thing, but you know, I think it's definitely just like with recruiters. If you're just honest, you know, you're just, hey, it happens. A lot of people go through this. It was no fault of my own. And actually, you know, friends and family can be a really great resource.
True.
You know, if you have friends who are in maybe the same line of work, or even if they're not in the same line of work, you know, you never know when the person, you know, next to you at the gym may have a brother who works in the same industry. And a lot of experts recommend, you know, just trying to tell as many people as possible, because you never know when that networking can land you into that next job.
And you never know when it's going to happen to you, do you?
No, not at all. It's one of those things you can't predict.
That's true. All right, Brittany Height, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks a lot for having me.
And for more information, you can check out WSJ.com. And that's all we have time for right now. There is much more business news at abcnews.com. I'm Jackie Hyland in New York. Thanks for watching.